I think that in some ways it's easier to keep God far away. To bring God in, even mentally in a close way, is intimate. And if intimacy is not part of your theology, right. And so I'm always very intentional about saying the breath of a loving God, because I think a lot of people say they believe in a loving God, but their actions are God's way out here and I want to keep God way out here.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. Hello, and welcome back to More Than One Way. Thank you for joining us for another episode. We're excited to welcome back Caroline Vogel, friend of the podcast, for a discussion all about breath, encompassing the practical and spiritual implications of breath work. In seasons of stress and anxiety, our always present breath can be a powerful tool to reset our minds and spirits, re-engage with the present moment, and connect intimately with the loving Spirit of God. Caroline brings a wealth of experience and wisdom, and we're thankful for the time we shared with her. Let's jump into the conversation. Take it away, Thom.
Thank you, Caroline, for being here with us. And one of the things that I am experiencing in life right now is since we're going through, it seems to me, changes kind of on a micro level, each person in their own way, and then it feels like kind of on a societal level as well, that can generate a lot of anxiety. And it just got me thinking about breath work. It got me thinking about breath work, meditation, mindfulness, all that stuff that just try to help us with some of our own anxiety. And that's why I wanted you to come.
Great.
And so from your perspective, one of the things that I'd really love to hear, based on your backgrounds and spiritual traditions and things like that, what exactly is breath from your
Well, so, my background, obviously, or maybe not obviously, for people who are listening, is Christianity. And, breath is all through the Bible. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've always been so drawn to the Holy Spirit as, the third part of the Trinity, in that so much of my understanding of the Holy Spirit is the breath of God, the movement of God within individuals, within the world. And so I've always just been fascinated by the movement of God's breath.
Yeah.
And so, you think about Ezekiel and the Hebrew scriptures of God putting breath into the dry bones. And
so it's like a life-enhancing, life-giving.
Well, I don't even think it's just an enhance. It certainly can enhance, but we don't have life without it.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's
life-giving.
It's life-giving. It's a necessity to just move around our days.
Yeah.
And and then there's all through the Gospels, there's places where the Holy Spirit and Jesus are engaging, and there's that movement of God between the two of them. Right. It's two entities of the Trinity, and so breath is everywhere.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying is breath is life.
Yes.
And I think one of the reasons I wanted to kind of tease this out a little bit is just to help get, hopefully, people's interest with the idea that breath and divinity are connected.
Oh, absolutely.
And that they always have been. That's throughout all traditions. As like in the Hebrew scriptures, it's the Ruach. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's got to do with wind. It's got to do with spirit, it's got to do with breath, and that all those things are pointing toward something greater than themselves, in a sense.
Right. That we have within us.
That is with us all the time. And that's the thing.
All the time.
It's so easy to take breath for granted.
Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm. So my hope with trying to tie it to something greater, is just that. Well, try not to, or at least find spaces where you can experience how powerful breath is.
Right.
Right. So one for instance, one of the guys I've studied with, and I think you know him, Richard Rohr.
Sure.
He did a thing once when I was out in New Mexico with him, and he talked about how some rabbis and others, since the word Yahweh doesn't really have vowels,
Mm-hmm.
is that really that word has been seen as a breathing,
Yes.
a breathing exercise.
Yeah.
So breathing in on the YH, breathing out on the WH.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes an ongoing, not only reminder of, but experience of the presence of this God that they called Yahweh.
Yes.
Did you ever hear that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. See, I'd never heard that. I'd never heard that. That was like news to me.
Yeah. But you have to remember, I've always had like these sensitive antenna around breath and spirit. And so, yeah, when I heard that, I caught on to it because I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. That feels intuitive.
Yeah.
In an embodied way.
Yeah, and so you could do it, once again, try it out, the whole breath in, like Yah, and way, breath out.
Right.
And so I give it a go, and I tried it, and yeah, man, it just opened up my sense of presence.
Right. And so then what do you notice about that, Thom?
Well, what do I notice about my sense of presence?
Yeah.
Well, that for one thing is everything is the moment, in a sense.
This present moment.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right.
So, and in that moment, there's so many things going on that I probably can't process all that's going on.
Right.
So it slows me down, that breath, and focuses my attention on something, once again, that could so easily be taken for granted.
Sure.
But is life-giving.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and I think one of the things that's difficult about assessing the present moment is that our minds, right? Like our bodies can be right here in this present moment, but even as I'm talking to you, a part of my mind could be thinking about something that happened yesterday or something that I'm anticipating happening later today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? And so the more our mind or parts of our mind are, and lots and lots of research has been shown, but we all know it in an embodied way pretty easily and intuitively, is that the more our body kind of rehearses the past, the more depressed we get, right? And the more we go out into the future, whether it's just a little bit later today or tomorrow or a couple weeks from now, the more likely we are to feel anxious
yeah.
Right? And especially with smartphones that are like always with us, whether it's a text message or social media, our mind is always being drawn into the past, the present, the future. And so I think it's getting more and more difficult for people to even know if they are in the present moment, right?
Yes,
because just going, where is my mind actually in this moment?
Yeah.
I'm here with you.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, is there a part of me that's thinking about what I have to do this afternoon? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so for those of you listening, that we did a breath exercise before we started that maybe we'll play, because it certainly was a lovely way for me to get present. Because I have things on my plate, as it were, and most people do. See, that's the thing, right?
I think everybody does. I think it's part of being human.
Yeah, so it's like natural to then start thinking about the next thing that has to be done.
Right.
And all I know for me is, yes, it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety and totally pulls me out of the moment.
Yes.
And so, in a sense, we're kind of offering that to you to say, here's one way.
Yes.
Right?
Here's one way to use something that you always have to draw you to the present moment.
Yeah.
Which people say is really the only place to experience God.
Yeah. Right. Where else are you going to experience Him?
Right.
Where else is it going to happen? As we talk about it, it's like, well, no, duh. Right.
Well, I think a lot of people can come back with the argument of, well, but I love thinking about where God has been with me in the past.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's still the past.
Right.
It's very hard to get an embodied feeling, a felt sense of a loving God, even if you're thinking about the past, thinking about God in the past.
Yeah.
Right? That What most people are looking for is like a present moment encounter with a loving God.
Yeah. And what we're saying is breath and doing breath exercises, work and stuff like that is one way to do that.
Yes.
Right. I wonder how much that might shift people's image of God.
Can you say more about that?
Well,
tell me about your curiosity.
Well, my curiosity is sometimes if I have a picture of a guy sitting up on a throne somewhere far away,
right?
That this idea of breath as being a part of what God is feels foreign,
right?
So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe then therefore by taking in, that's why I brought up the Yahweh thing. So by taking in that, you realize God might be more like breath than like a person sitting on a throne.
Right. And that, how can that not shift your theology?
Yeah.
Your understanding of who God is and the relationship that you have with that being.
Yes. Yes, with that always present being. Once again, because we go back to breath, because even when I don't recognize it, when I take it for granted,
right,
it's still there giving me life.
Well, then I think it also then pushes the question, Thom, right, of like, do I want God to be close? Right. Like it pushes people to go like, well, what kind of God do I believe in? And do I want that God to be close to me?
Yeah.
And if you don't, I really hope you consider that in a loving place, a safe place with your priest or whoever to really flesh that out.
Yeah.
Because when I read the Gospels, for example, I do see a God who yearns to be close to us, but I have to be willing and want that God to be close to me.
Yeah.
Right? And then it brings up like, well, do I trust that God? And, it brings up all the relational dynamics of other kinds of relationships.
Right.
But I think a lot of people don't stop to engage the multifaceted aspects of relationship with God.
Can you say more about that? That's lovely.
Well, I think that in some ways it's easier to keep God far away or to imagine that God is at a distance. To bring God in, even mentally in a close way, is intimate. And if intimacy is not part of your theology, your belief in a loving God, that's going to really, I could see why somebody would be like, "Whoo, I don't think I want to do breath work. I don't know if I want to experience the breath of God."
Right.
And so I'm always very intentional about saying the breath of a loving God.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people say they believe in a loving God, but their actions are God's way out here and I want to keep God way out here. That's been my experience.
So kind of like fear-based?
Fear-based.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we live in a fear-based culture for the most part. And so I think our theology can be, there's sneaky places in our theology that have embedded fear, even though we don't really necessarily know that until we really start looking at it.
Yeah. And so part of like looking at it could happen while you take time to sit and start this process of paying attention to breath. Right, because that can pop up. Right?
Oh, it can totally pop up.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, the first time I ever went on a silent retreat, it was a multi-day silent retreat. I think we were there 4 nights, 5 days, and I was really excited. And that's a long time to be with your breath, right? It's a long time, nobody talking to you. You're not talking to anybody else.
Yeah.
And it was excruciating for the first 2 days. You had the honeymoon period for the first couple hours. You're like, this is amazing. I want to stay here forever.
Yeah.
And then my brain was just on fire.
Yeah.
And there was no getting away from it, right? And but I found returning to the breath really helped ground me.
Okay.
But it was moving through a lot of fire first. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's another reason why it's kind of hard to find time to sit and be still and sit with breath is because who knows what's going to come up.
Well, I think that, that's a very real experience for most people. Like, I don't want to sit with whatever's going on inside of me, right? Because for most people, their minds are going really fast. And when you sit down to meditate and to focus, anchor your attention on breath, you oftentimes first have to look at those thoughts. And some people, I think, go through this routine of like putting them down, right? Like putting the thoughts down as they focus on breath. But there usually is some engagement, and there's usually a resistance to the engagement of even putting the thoughts down. Right. It's like, no, I'd rather not, thanks.
Yeah, so not only is it kind of connecting to the in an intimate way to however one understands the divine God, but it's also connecting you to yourself, is what I hear you say. Yeah.
Well, and I think the breath connects us to God in us.
In us, yeah.
Right? And so this movement of God happening within our own beings, it can't, in my opinion, it can't not be an encounter with yourself.
Right. So
and God.
It's kind of both. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, it's always both. And so, so I think you're pointing to a really good example of a lot of people probably really want to engage the breath of a loving God within them, but not at the cost of having to engage themselves.
Gotcha. Because then that can bring up, well, at least in my experience, that can bring up the past or or
anxiety about the future.
And sitting with that rather than falling into it.
Yes.
Is almost like a skill.
Oh, I think it's definitely a skill.
Yeah, like learning how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I will tell you though, on that first retreat, this is something that comes back to me a lot. So, like who knows which day it was, but at some point I realize I am so grateful to be sitting here as a Christian. Because at some point I felt the presence of a loving God with me in all that silence, right? And that was so comforting to me.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have had since I was a child, and so I've always felt really grateful for that connection with the loving God. But it's, again, I just think of so many people who don't have that, or their faith or their religion or their belief system doesn't believe in that, or doesn't, and I'm going, oh my gosh, how would I get through 5 days without the presence of a loving God with me? Like this it's hard, but it would be hell, without it. So
yeah. So in your experience, does breath work come kind of like, is it welcomed and natural for people, or is there resistance, or?
Well, so I think it depends on the sector in which I'm bringing it up, right? And when I'm in church world and talking to people as a spiritual director, or giving a talk in a church, or those kinds of things, I do feel like that breath of the Spirit feels like an intuitive segue. So I don't,
almost like a welcome
thing. Like, God, I think I've kind of been looking for that. I've never kind of considered it, but I already have kind of language around it. I just haven't kind of opened that door before. But I think I've been kind of looking for that door. And so there's an ease there
in that world.
For sure. When I use breath work in the therapy world, it's really interesting. I have some people who are like, this is what I've been looking for my whole life.
Wow.
Right? And there's an instant recognition of, I think I've been holding my breath my whole life. And that was me, right? Like I identified that several years ago about myself. I was like, I think I've been going through my life like literally holding my breath, And then I started to be curious about, when I find the most ease in my life, I genuinely, like literally, am breathing more deeply, right? And I feel in that openness that creates, I feel a much easier connection to a loving God, right? But when I'm holding it, or when my breath is really shallow, that's where I had lived most of my life. And it's very easy to not feel connected to a loving God, or actually to anybody, right? Like shallow breath actually creates an isolated feeling within our own being. So I have had, I've worked with certain people who said, oh gosh, but when I breathe, when we do these exercises together, I feel more relaxed, and that doesn't feel safe to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've experienced a lot. And I was like, I get it, because I used to live that way the same.
Yeah.
So there's a yearning for it.
Yeah.
But the pathway to it can oftentimes feel really off-putting because it's so foreign.
Yeah.
And things that are foreign to us, of course, are going to feel threatening.
Yeah. So I hear you saying foreign and threatening, and sometimes uncomfortable.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So a lot of it's just going to depend on where like so many things, like everything, probably where the person happens to be and what their background is.
Right.
What they're bringing into it. Right. I just had this experience with a group of guys, and one of the guys just got into how much he never specifically said breath work, but I just connect breath work with most meditation.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So he just talked about how meditation has really just shifted and changed his life.
Yeah.
And he was there sitting there with his peers, with his friends and other people. And it was so interesting to hear them kind of start to question him about it.
Yeah.
And ask him, some of the practical things. So you just think about nothing. That kind of thing. And it was so interesting to sit there and watch. And part of me was like, golly, this is like an interview for a job.
Yeah, right.
Like, and am I going to give you the job? Breath, you're on.
You're in the hot seat.
You're
Breath.
on the hot seat. Yeah, right. You're on the hot seat, Breath, and prove it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever experienced it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And what comes up in me, Thom, is I immediately want to start talking about the science of it.
Yeah.
Right? To give people the data points.
Well, throw some of that out there for those
sure.
so people sitting out there going,
sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So what we know biologically, and it's been studied a lot now, is that when people you've brought up anxiety several times, is when we become anxious, our breath becomes more shallow, right?
Yeah.
It's shorter and it's not as deep. And so when we turn to breath work, we oftentimes want to engage breath work where it's elongating the breath and we're breathing more deeply. So we go from that shallow breathing in our chest to more belly breathing, which is going to use a fuller range of our diaphragm. Most people, I was thinking about this when I was driving over, I was like, oh, what is that statistic? I'm terrible with numbers. But most human beings use a fraction of their lungs to breathe every day as they move through life. A fraction, right? So just even learning to belly breathe for a small portion of your day is going to increase your health. I mean, maybe tremendously over time, right? You're getting more oxygen to your brain, to all your organs. But the main thing about slowing your breath down is that it signals to the brain, you're not in overwhelm. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be in fight, flight, freeze right now.
Okay.
So you use this internal mechanism that you actually do have agency to work with.
Right.
And you use it very intentionally to signal to the brain, there's not a tiger in front of you. Right? Now, it takes a training of the brain. There's this thing called coherent breathing, where you breathe in for a certain count, you hold for a certain count, you breathe out for a certain count, and you hold, right? And typically you're breathing in for 4 counts, you're holding for 4 counts. You breathe out a nice long 6 count, and then hold for 2, right? We actually have more control biologically over our exhale than we do our inhale. And so when we work with that agency of our exhale, it helps to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which says, you're not in fight, flight, freeze. But you really have to work with it, right? Like, you can't experience anxiety your whole life and go, I'm going to breathe for 2 minutes and not feel anxiety. That doesn't work.
Did it?
Yeah, I did it. Woo! That doesn't work, right? Like, it's not a magic bullet. But people who are real practitioners of coherent breathing, like, they get to the point where they practice 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And they have experienced, most of them, radical shifts in the way their brain works, in their regulation of emotion, and in health points. Like, again, whether it's blood work or organ health or how well they sleep. Yeah. All those things.
Right. So if you talk about it when you're a practitioner, it can get to that point. What's a good starting, like for people who are starters?
I tell people to start anywhere, and to start as small as you want it to be, right? Because the important thing is to do it. Yeah. And you can always build. So I oftentimes tell people just start with 30 seconds, right? Like take your phone out, set it for 30 seconds, and just slow your breathing down. And then the next day, maybe do it for 30 seconds, maybe bump it up to 60 seconds. Right. And then notice, the best motivator is noticing how your body responds to it. Right? Not some rule, not because I told you so, not what the book said, but watching how you notice shifts in your own body.
Yeah, paying attention to that.
I
mean, that was some of what we did prior to our conversation. That's what it was really doing to me. I was really noticing, golly, I've got to go to the hospital, and I've got to do this wedding rehearsal, and I've got to go to the wedding rehearsal dinner, and I've got to.
That list.
That's my mind. That's my mind was doing, and I just kind of heard it, felt it really, not even heard it, felt it just slow down. Yeah. Slow down, because when I get into that, what you're calling flight, it just feels like a constant internal franticness.
Yes. I so appreciate you bringing that up, Thom, because I think oftentimes when we think about fight, flight, freeze, and I also add fawn, is we think it like something massive is happening, right? Yeah. Like there's been a car accident. Yeah. Or we even see something where like there's this mass tragedy, right? And even though we're not part of it, we experience it in our nervous system. But the reality is that so many of us, as we go through our everyday life, are experiencing a form of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn as we go through our day. And you nailed it. Yeah. You feel it in your body. There's a freneticness, right? Like there's like an energy to it. And you're like, oh, there it is. Yeah. I talk a lot about the window of tolerance, and I like to flip it though to like a window of resiliency. And breath can help us build that window of resiliency so that things that normally would take us into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we actually can use these tools to pull back into a place of safety, so that then we can engage challenge again, right? We can just be like, oh, I can work with this, right? We don't perceive it as stress.
No, that's it. That's the way it felt. I don't feel as stressed, that big word stress, and just recognize, okay, one at a time. Just do one thing at a time, and that's all you can do.
Right.
Right, and that once again, it's the amazing thing that something that I can take so for granted, like breath, got me to that place.
Right.
So it has a practical everyday use, I guess, is what I'm babbling on about.
It does have a practical everyday use. Yeah. That you can use throughout your day, every day. Yeah. Right. Andy, my partner's beloved grandmother, who's no longer with us, but she used to say, we would have these sayings, and one of them was, slow is pro. Huh? And I was just this morning watching this video that Diana Butler Bass had posted like on her Substack or something. And it's this 96-year-old woman, and she has this sparkle in her eye, right? And she's kind of like talking about like the wisdom of her life, and she'd had this really difficult, I think she even calls like horrific childhood, but she went on to have like this really beautiful life. And she talks about experiencing the joy and wonder of everyday life. And at the very end, she says something like, if I would tell people to do, just one thing differently, she says, go slower. And I think when we anchor our attention in our breath, it helps us to go slower.
Yeah, does me, for sure.
It just slows us down. It slows the mind down. And I think we live in a culture that always is feeding us this lie, this myth of faster's better. Yeah. The more you can do, the better. Yeah. right? The more you have, the better.
Sure.
And so to some degree, even as fundamental as breath is, there's something inherently going against the grain by slowing your breath down.
Yeah, the word slow becomes a negative word.
I've received it that way as a lot of my life. What do you mean slow?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I've even been guilty of it with my own kids.
Yeah,
what are you doing? Let's go.
That's right.
Get in the car.
You don't have any commercials on slowing down usually, except
No.
for, I guess, YouTube has the Zen moments now. But by and large, it's, God, you're slow. That means you're out of step. You're wacky. You're dorky. You don't fit in.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's just the
so what you're saying, she's
iceberg.
saying, and what this whole thing is no, just the opposite is what helps us to engage a full everyday life.
Right.
Yeah.
Just slowing down and using the breath to slow you down. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you want to say about it? Thank you so much for all this stuff. Is there any other insights or little gems, or you want to lead us through something?
Oh, sure. I think I want to say one more thing about the Holy Spirit, which is I come back to this all the time in my own life, which is what if we took seriously that the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, is with us all the time and is a ready guide. I mean, like, it says it in the Gospel of John that Jesus says, listen, I'm going to give you another advocate. The Father's going to give you another advocate, and it's going to be a guide. We'll guide you into all truth, and we'll be with you forever.
Yeah.
And so when I connect with breath, I connect with that, like we talked about at the beginning, that divine movement that is inherently wise, right? Like, who doesn't at any given moment of their day need a dose of a bit more wisdom?
Yeah.
Right?
I need it.
Right? And so I think I just want to encourage people to not shy away from the fact that attuning to your breath can help you attune to the holy breath.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which can help guide you, whether it's your thoughts or your emotions, or, so many people right now with so much going on in our country and in the world are feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can feel overwhelming. And then with the overwhelm, they can feel lost in their emotions or in their racing mind. And the breath can bring us back to this grounded place of connecting to a guide.
Yeah.
That's ultimate wisdom. So, and it's right there. I feel like we don't talk about it enough in Christianity, we leave it to other sectors, and maybe it's because we don't have enough basic practices to help people do it,
and experience it for themselves.
Yeah, so
yeah.
like that intellectual mind can only take you so far in terms of grounding. And so I think there really is something that's been powerful for my life. I will say that much.
Yeah. Well, the way I hear you is that there's this inner authority that you can connect with when the external authorities are just driving you nuts.
Sure.
Or they're not helpful.
Right.
So it's okay. Well, I have my own internal authority that's as big as this advocate you're talking about.
Yes.
That is what people throughout the centuries have called the Holy Spirit, or whatever other language people use to try to
or
describe.
Native Americans just call it spirit.
They're
great spirit. Right?
Trying to describe this mystery that lives in us, through us, and as us.
Yes.
That's what I hear you saying.
Yep.
And it's like, if I can connect to this inner part of me and trust it.
Yeah.
And intuition is a part of that, and breath
Right.
is a part of that, and imagination is a part of that. And I hear all that wrapped up in what you're saying. And it's like, trust that inner authority.
Yes. That reminds me of something I was thinking on the way over here, Thom, so there's this modality that's kind of hot right now. A lot of people are reading books about it, called internal family systems.
Oh, yeah. I'm reading books on it now.
You're reading books on that? Okay. There's some great books that are very accessible. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And Richard Schwartz created it or who was inspired, however you want to talk about it. But anyway, he's on a lot of podcasts, and it's very compelling, and a lot of people find it very useful. But he talks about, internal family systems, talks about the 8 C's. And it's really about connecting with your core self, right? And I think it's really the self that so many of us are trying to live out of, that's calm, that's compassionate, that's curious. Of course, I'm not going to be able to think of all 8 of them right here on the spot, but I find that breath can help people access that core self better than just about anything. Right? And so when you're trying to find your way through a situation or a decision-making process, you want to be making decisions and finding your way through from that core place, right? And just even asking yourself, am I curious about this? Am I calm? Am I compassionate towards myself and other people, right? As I move through this. And so again, just that everyday practice of using breath to drop down into the core of your being so that you can find your way through. And that inner, I wanted to give a little meat to that inner authority, because I think sometimes people like don't know what that is, or they freak out about it, or don't trust it. Sure. And
same with like the Holy Spirit and any of that kind of stuff. So to give any kind of a new way to kind of try to talk about it, or a different way to try to talk about it.
Because like who doesn't want to move through life with more calm, with a greater sense of compassion for yourself and other people, right? And that can be hard to pull from in really stressful moments.
Yes. So, especially like I said, if you're in that flight, fright, all that whole thing. It really pulls you out of it. And I think what's so unfair is that it's often in times where you really want it the most, where you want the connection to the inner authority. You want to stay grounded in those 8 C's, right? You want to move from that place. And you're like, I can't get there. It can be so frustrating. So, oh, gosh. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you, and take care.